be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had ordered them. When they saw him, they worshipped, but they doubted. Then Jesus approached and said to them, "All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always until the end of the age." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning. It's the Feast of the Ascension. It's Memorial Day weekend. And this is our question and answer session to talk about anything on your mind that has to do with God, with religion, and so forth. And you know, if you can remember back to your catechism days many, many years ago, you know, if you ask a question that the sister couldn't answer, she just said, "Well, it's a mystery." So if you do that with me today, I'll tell you the same thing. Okay, is there anything you'd like to talk about? There's so much going on in the world, in our minds. You know, there must be some questions you have. You're like, we're going to do it for 15 minutes, and our timer behind me is going to stop me in 15 minutes. Do you have anything in particular in mind you would like to talk about this morning?
Father,
Yes.
I always have a question about annulments. I know
About
the
annulments?
The
Okay.
church is trying to make the process easier, you know, for the Catholics that are wanting to go through the process. But my question is, a marriage that was originally made in a Catholic church, they then get divorced, they now get an annulment. I don't understand how the church classifies any children that came from that previous marriage.
All right, did you hear the question?
Yes.
She's talking about annulments, and if a couple gets married in the Catholic Church and later on the marriage is annulled, what is the status of the children, right?
Right.
The status of the children does not change. Annulment does not bastardize the children. They're still considered legitimate children. The reason that an annulment can be given, to begin with, is that if at the time of the marriage, not later on, but the time of the marriage, there was something essentially missing in the consent that was given. When they say, "I take you for life, I promise to be true to you forever," if that really wasn't the case, and there was something there that was missing, and it can be shown by later activity that the consent to the marriage was not a valid consent, then there's a possibility of an annulment, because it wasn't really a marriage. You know, I don't know if that makes sense or not. I hate the annulment process to begin with, all right? I'll work with anybody in the world who wants to get an annulment. I'll work with you, but I don't like the process. But basically, the only reason we have a process is in a sense to give you a second chance if the first marriage was not a good marriage. And it can be shown that something essential was lacking to it. If you can't show that, then there's no annulment. That's the different one. Most annulments have to do with people who get married outside of the church. Namely, they get married by a minister or a JP or something like that. Well, the first law of the church is every baptized Catholic should be married in the presence of a priest. So if you can just simply show that, then that marriage can be declared annul. And that's the most common one. That's only a matter of collecting a few papers, and that's an easy one. Anyway, the process is there for that reason. So I don't object to the idea behind the process. There are certain cases, where people really might deserve an annulment, but they can't get one. We've got to keep that in mind too. Then it becomes a pastoral approach, to the situation. Okay, that was a good start. I don't know, did I answer that or not?
Yes.
Okay, what else? What do we got?
Father, a few years ago, there's been liturgical changes to the way we do things at Mass.
Yes.
Changed the Apostles' Creed. One of the other substantive changes it had is that we stand right after the presentation of gifts. And I was wondering, I noticed that coming here to Mass, you guys do things like the way that were before, but if you go to other churches, in other places, either in Tucson or anywhere else, they stand a little bit earlier before they say, "May the Lord accept the sacrifice of your hands." Were those changes, were they required, or were they just merely advisory for each parish to decide for itself?
You know, that business of standing at a particular moment was not an official change of any kind. That's just the way people will do it. No matter where they stand now or 3 seconds later they stand. That doesn't make it. The changes were in the language. And that was basically the only change was the language. And when you change the language, you change the whole Mass. All churches are supposed to be using the new language, which we do here. You can go from one church to another, though, and things may look a little different. Like people here, when they like to shake hands and so forth at the sign of peace. Some churches, they don't like to do that. That's not a basic difference. It's just a matter of choice. But there was no change in posture or activity during Mass. It was just the language that was changed. Anything else? Yes.
I can remember as a child wearing a veil to church. What happened to that?
What happened to the veil at church for women? It just sure disappeared, didn't it? There was no edict, no rule or anything else that was announced that says you can't wear a veil. It just sort of changed that way. People just took it in their own hands and did what they were comfortable with. I'm gonna. Do you have what else? I have something maybe like. I'm gonna do three quick things. All right. First, recently you heard that our president changed what they called the Johnson edict, which forbade churches to preach politics. He lifted that and said, churches, go ahead and do it. Now, I'm just going to ask you the question. How many of you here think that's a good idea? How many here do not think it's a good idea? Yeah. I agree with you. The reason I don't think it's a good idea is that can become a very divisive. You can divide congregations that way. You're going to end up with Republican churches and Democratic churches. That's not the way the church is. Our church is supposed to be a big tent that involves everybody, even though we don't all agree on everything, rather than dividing us up. I think it would be a very divisive thing. That's why I don't like it. Yes?
I got a comment on that, Father. Just after I said I didn't like the thing, but I don't like the government telling a church what it can and cannot preach. I agree with you that I don't want politics being preached, but it should be up to the individual church, not the government in Washington.
Okay, that's a point of view. Okay, anyway, as long as I'm here, we're not going to do it, I'll tell you. There's a couple of things that I are in my mind, and I'll put it this way. How many of you here have a problem forgiving people? Raise your hand. Problem with forgiveness. Forgiveness. Okay. How many people here wonder about their own purpose in life? Don't seem to have any particular purpose? Raise your hand. Okay. Would you like to talk about either one of those? Which one? Forgiveness. Let's just look at forgiveness for a minute here. Whoever said the phrase, forgive and forget, was absolutely crazy. Why? Because we will never forget the hurts in our life. We will take them to the grave. When we've been hurt, we never forget it. Don't even try to forget it. That doesn't make any difference. That doesn't mean we have not forgiven. We have to forgive even though we do not forget. What does it mean to forgive? Wow. Some people say, well, I don't want to forgive because that's just telling the other person that what they did was justified. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It's not saying that the other person is off the hook for what they did. Everybody's responsible for their own actions, okay? I'm talking about the person who's been hurt. How do we forgive? We forgive, first of all, when our attitude changes from one of revenge and hope you get yours, etc., 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 and you deserve to be paid back, from that attitude to an attitude of, God, I forgive this person. I want you to bless this person. I want you to touch this person's heart, bring happiness to this person, and mean it. That's forgiveness. That's an act of the will. Has nothing to do with our memory or anything else. If we can come to that decision and make that prayer, make that statement, we have forgiven. And what a wonderful load is removed from us. If we can't, we say, I'm sorry, I can't say that about so-and-so, they hurt me too much, then that person, we still have not forgiven that person. What really bothers me, really saddens me, is many times when I'm dealing with death or funerals, that there's families that don't forgive each other. You know, they'll take that lack of forgiveness to the grave. I just hate to see that, you know? That's not a good way to live or to die. And keep this in mind, that when we forgive someone else, we're not going to change that person's life at all. They may not even care. You know, we change ourselves. And we are the ones that benefit from our own forgiveness of other people. We get it out of ourselves. We don't let it sit there and fester, that anger inside. That's very hurtful to us. And when it's really hard to forgive someone, one thought that helps me personally come to that forgiveness is just a reminder. I look back over my life and I think, how much has God had to forgive me? Oh, Lord. Lots and lots. And when I get in touch with how I have been forgiven, it sure makes it easier to forgive someone else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. How are we doing time-wise back there?
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Do rich people go to heaven?
Do rich people go
Talking
to heaven?
about the camel and the eye of the needle.
Yeah. Well, from what Jesus told us, it's harder for rich people to go to heaven than for people who are not rich. But as Jesus also said, with God, everything is possible. So it's quite possible for rich people to go to heaven. Why in the world would it be harder for a rich person to go to heaven? Well, the only obvious thing I can think of is that the more we have here on earth, the more we hold on to, the harder it is to let go of. You know? And the more we have here, the more it consumes us. All of the things of the world consume us more because we have so much invested in it, you know? And I'm not saying there's anything sinful about that. I'm just saying I think that's the reason why it is easier, in a sense, for a person who doesn't have as much to let go of to make the transition. That makes sense? But it's certainly possible. I mean, Jesus isn't saying if you're rich, you can't go to heaven. Jesus himself, when he was here on earth, dealt with the poor people, middle class, and rich. He had dinner with the poor folks, dinner with the rich people. He was out there ministering to everybody. Yes?
Father, do you have to ask for forgiveness to get forgiven?
You have to ask for forgiveness to be forgiven? No. In fact, most people that we forgive never ask for forgiveness. If they did, it'd be much easier for us to say, oh yeah, you're forgiven. But we don't have to be asked. In fact, in most cases, when we say we forgive someone, they don't even know that we've done it. They don't even care. They don't want our forgiveness. You know, they're the ones who hurt us. They don't want our forgiveness. They couldn't care less. They don't have to ask for it. No. Forgiveness is without being asked for. If we're asked for it, we certainly can forgive. But they don't have to ask for it. Okay. Yes, sir. Everybody's content? No mystery question? Okay. Listen, I hope you all have a great Memorial Day weekend.